Hi, this is Rachel with Fiona Sandwich Patterns, and in this video we are going to be making a mountain block from my National Park quilt pattern. So join me as we get started. This is the block that we are going to be making today. It's shown in two different color options, colorways, and really the sky is the limit for you. In this one, I wanted this to resemble a little bit of the Northern Lights, and this is for Grand Teton National Park. And then this one is for Rocky Mountain National Park, and you can see that it's the same mountains, but they look totally different. This one is much darker and harder to see on camera, but I used black for the mountains and then the darker colors for the sky, and here I used blue for the mountains and then a lighter blue for the sky. So I have chosen gray today for the mountains and then this calico for the sky. And I'm going to cut the template. Always make sure that you measure your block before you get started to make sure that it printed to the right size. Sometimes printers like to reset themselves, and I always make sure that I leave extra around the sides. I don't cut the template to exactly the size that I need. So I'm going to cut these down into smaller pieces to make them more manageable. And I have A1 and A2. So I give it just an eyeball, and I want to be about right here. I'll use the larger template. And I generally try to go about 1/4 of an inch larger than where the seam allowance would be, just to give myself extra room in case my sewing is off or the piece shifts at all. And right now all I'm concerned about is A1 and A2. So what you'll notice is I laid my template on top of the fabric and I gave an eyeball, and I have about 3/8 of an inch here from this point. This is the line that I will be sewing along first. So from here to here is about 3/8 of an inch. So that's going to be plenty. Now for piece 2, I really like this fabric, so I'm going to try to conserve as much as I can, and I'm going to give an eyeball here. This is the line that I'll be stitching along, so I want to have 1/4 of an inch on the right hand side of that, and then about 1/4 of an inch extra on the other side. And remember, I like to give myself a little bit of extra, and I will straighten that up. I need a new rotary blade. I keep forgetting to get new ones. Okay, so then you take your template and you flip it backwards, upside down. I like to use a light box to place all of my pieces. And the reason I do is it's easier than holding it up and having the light above or a window show you where the pieces are. So I hope that you can see this. If not, you can hold it up to a window or a light and you can do the same thing. So working in space A1, so the template is face down, and I put a bit of glue in section A1. I just like a cheap Scholastic glue from Office Depot or Office Max or wherever. So what you will see that I've done is the template is face down, the printed side is down, and on the first piece only you place the fabric face up, because you're going to be placing your next piece of fabric face down, and this creates the right sides together that you would normally be sewing along if you'd have your right sides together, right? Correct? And then you would sew 1/4 of an inch. And where people get confused is they think that all of the pieces need to go right side up, and that's not true, because if you were sewing all of your pieces right side up, your next piece, when you would open it to join maybe another piece up here, this piece would be face down. So you always put, you know, just like you would be putting two pieces of fabric together, you might put one down and then put the other on top. This is the same exact thing. The only thing is that you have kind of like training wheels. You're going to be sewing here. You have a template that you're going to be sewing on top of. So just like you would be putting two pieces together and sewing along the side with your right sides together, this is the first piece that you're going to be putting your right sides together. So there's really not a huge difference between traditional piecing and foundation paper piecing. It's just getting over the mental hurdle of which piece goes face up and where do all the other ones go. So template is face down. I put some glue in section A1 and put the piece of fabric right side up, and hopefully you can see that I've made sure that I've left lots of room around the outside with the fabric, so there's plenty of room to trim that up. So I don't need the light box anymore. So now I flipped the template right side up, and I'm going to put my ruler along the line, and I want it to extend from one side of the paper template to the other side, and I only score the first line. I know that a lot of sewers like to score all of them, and I do not, because if you mis-sew that seam, it's already become weakened because you've scored all of the lines, and then it makes the paper template really flimsy. Okay, so your next step is you're going to line your ruler up with 1/4 of an inch from the scored line. So we flipped the template over. We started with it face up, flip it towards you. I always do all of the motions in the same direction so then I don't mess up. You'll notice that I also sew with the bulk of the fabric on the left hand side of the machine. So 1/4 of an inch, line up your 1/4 of an inch line with the edge of the scored template, and then cut. This is one place that really saves me from making mistakes if I follow this method. So you put your next piece right side up, and you could do it this way too, but I find that it's easier to always have my next piece right side up, so then I know, okay, my next piece goes right side up, and just remember, you want to have right sides together. So if you're doing it different, just make sure that your right sides are together. So here's what I was hoping to show you was you want to make sure that you have enough fabric extending on the side over here and extending down this way. Let me bring this over so that maybe you can see this a little bit better. So here's my point. I can move this down just a little bit here, then I'm not wasting all this pretty fabric here, and my line, you can't see, but I can faintly see, for the end of A2 is going to be right over here. So that means that I have enough fabric on either side that will give me enough room for a seam allowance, so I am good. This is a good piece here. Flip your template back over and pin. I always pin on the left hand side. If you're ready, you might play around with this and see if doing it on the right hand side would work better for you, but I find that it just works easier for me if I have the bulk of the fabric along the left side of the machine, so then it doesn't get bunched up inside of the machine. Okay, so I have decreased my stitch length to 1.5, going to sew with my needle in the middle of the foot. I'm using a walking foot, but any foot will work. Sew just down the center of the line. I don't even move my needle from one side to the other. And then stop when you get to about the end. You can see I'm about on the end, or the middle of the line, rather, and open it up and press. Okay, so then we're going to go with A3 and line up the edge of your ruler on top of the line that you'll be stitching on and score that all the way down. And line up your 1/4 inch seam with the score line and cut that off. So then you have a 1/4 inch. I find that if I trim before I put my next piece on, I'm less likely to make a mistake. I feel like this is a small enough piece of fabric, it's manageable, that I'm not going to worry about trimming it down too much. So you'll pay attention to where you see the line, the sew line for A3, and I see that it's right here and I can see it here, and I want to make sure that the edge of my fabric extends beyond a 1/4 inch. And then the other thing that I'm paying attention to, and this will become much clearer with the last piece, is that my fabric here extends beyond the seam over here. It doesn't make any difference that when I open this up, the seam is way over here, because what matters is where the 1/4 inch is on the right hand side. If you're putting all the fabric on the left hand side, the 1/4 inch seam is on the right when the template is closed, and then all of the fabric is on the left, because what's going to happen is we're going to flip it over and then this fabric is going to be right here. It may seem like magic, but it's less magic than you might think. And I'm not concerned so much about any fabric here in section A4, only in A3, because that's the fabric that I'm working with right now. We're going to do the same exact thing, line up the center of the foot, and I remove my pins. Okay, so here's my 1/4 inch, and you can see that the pieces match up. It's a 1/4 inch there. We're going to flip this over, and that becomes the piece that I have just sewn. So then your next piece goes right sides together, and I am going to trim this up, so I'm going to, because I don't want to cut more fabric. I am thinking ahead one more step, and so I'm cutting my 1/4 inch on the next line along A4 and A3, because these pieces are going to go together next, and then I can use this next piece. But I'm not going to worry about this. This is fine, and I'm just going to trim it all up together. So that would be an example of one time that I would score the next piece in line, but I still wouldn't score all of them, just in case I needed to rip out something. So same thing, score, fold over 1/4 inch, trim along the edge of the ruler. These are things that you know and you're very familiar with. Now here's where you need to pay attention, because this is a larger piece, and this will just fit. So I have plenty of fabric extending from the folded point of the template, Again, we're not going to worry so much about when it's open, but when it's closed, I have plenty of fabric here. Let's see. Here's an example of one that wouldn't work. You can see, nope, this won't work. But even if I lay this, lay this down this way, this fabric is far too small because my template extends beyond. So I know that this corner right here is going to be the end of the template, so I can eyeball that there, and then I see that I need to be at least 1/4 of an inch extra from this point here, and the score line is raised a little bit so I can see that my fabric is going to work. And that's a big, big tip. If you don't know if your fabric is going to work, fold your template over, and if it fits in this area or extends outside of this area with the template, then it is going to match, or it's going to be a good size rather. And if it's not, then it's not going to be a good piece to use. All right, it's about 1/4 of an inch. So here I'm going to cut off this excess, flip it over, and trim. Remember, flip over, line up 1/4 of an inch, and then, that's too small, that's too small, and then trim. And this will work really nicely here. You can see that the fabric extends beyond this area here. You could go this way. In fact, I think I will. So I just hold down the template just along the seam, and then I flip over the already sewn piece. And you don't have to worry about this section down over here because your 1/4 of an inch, your seam allowance, this is your seam allowance right here, this white area outside of the dotted line. There's plenty of fabric there. I don't have to worry about the gray fabric here because that's already been sewn. I would love to hear in the comments what your favorite national park is with mountains. I'm particularly fond of the parks with mountains. And Grand Teton is my favorite. Okay, so you can see the mountains that are starting to emerge. And I line up the 1/4 of an inch with the seam, the solid line that you would sew the next block together. I don't always trust the outside of the block. I trust the seam with my ruler. And I try to always use the same side of the ruler. I've noticed on this one that one side is a little bit different than the other, so I always try to use the dotted side, so then my seams are always going to be the same size. So play around with your rulers to see if yours does the same thing or if yours are all the same size. But I also like the dotted side. It's a little bit thinner of a line than one that's a little bit more solid, so then I can see where I need to be cutting. So then I use the edge of my ruler. I don't line up the edge of my ruler with the dotted line on the template. because there might be some sort of printer variance, and I want to make sure that all of my blocks are going to be the same size. The only time that I would do something different is if I've measured my template and it's measuring too small, it's printed too small, and I've already started sewing, then I will just use my 5-inch ruler and I'll trim around, I'll trim around the excess on the outside. So flip it over, and there you have your block. Very, very simple. You can use this for any of the parks with Rocky Mountains. This would be great for Banff. It would be great for Grand Teton, Rocky Mountain National Park, Glacier, anywhere in the Rockies where there are more of the steep mountains than another place like Great Smoky Mountains where the mountains are more rolling. So anyway, thank you so much for joining me. If you liked this video, please share it, give it a heart or a thumbs up, and you can get the pattern in the description box. Thanks so much for joining me.